Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Keith Whittier. The man to my left is James Dunn. James, how are you?
Awesome, man. How are you?
Not too bad at all. James and I have the pleasure of working together, and many times we find ourselves on the opposite end of how we feel about things in the UFC. So we thought, let's settle this like gentlemen doing a blog. So thanks so much for joining me today.
No worries at all, buddy. Pleasure to be here.
All right, I'm going to start off with a burning question. In your opinion, who do you think is the greatest UFC champion of all time?
Oh, man. It's a fantastic question, so I appreciate it. To me, there's three people that stand out.
Okay.
I think there's George Rush St. Pierre.
Okay.
I think we have John Jones, and I believe we have Conor McGregor. Those are my three picks. And I know that's one of the most debated topics between us is Conor. We like to send messages to each other quite a bit.
Yes, we do.
Me for Conor, Keith against. But I think you could make arguments for all three of those gentlemen. It really just depends how you frame it, right? I think in the news these days you see nothing but John Jones is on suspension, he's getting caught for drugs, you see Conor's throwing things through windows, and you know, the one who has a clean slate is George St. Pierre. So it really depends on you frame it. Is it only in-ring activity, or are we going to step back and talk about, you know, their total image, so to speak, and the brand that they all have? So it really just depends on how you frame it.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. So let's talk about Conor. So I know Conor's your favorite.
Yes.
Conor's your guy. If Conor's watching, please send James some love. Why do you put Conor in the conversation?
Honestly, I don't know how you wouldn't put him in the conversation.
Okay.
If you look at all his fights, his trajectory, who he beat, how he beat them. You know, one of my favorite victories was his last one in the UFC. It just came up on my Instagram last night, which is that 4-punch combo to become the first double champion the UFC has ever seen.
The champ.
The champ, so to speak. So, you know, I totally get the, you know, the side of he is falling off the rails outside the ring, which, you know what, I don't disagree with. I think, you know, there's definitely some points to be made there. But if I look at in-ring activity and who does what he says he's going to do, calls it just like he says he's going to do it, and shows up every time. And you know, how many fights did Conor McGregor's opponent pull out with a week in advance, right? And now you see that all the time, and the people, you know, they want more money or they won't take the fight, where Conor's literally like, you get anyone and I will fight them. To me, that type of activity gets you into that conversation.
Okay. So I respect your list. I respect you sharing your list.
Yes.
I vehemently disagree. So for me, the two names on my list are either George St. Pierre, who I have as number one,
Okay.
and then number two I have Demetrius
Okay.
Mighty Mouse Johnson.
Yeah.
The reason I don't have John Jones in there is because he's been popped for the whole cocaine thing, but then popped for performance enhancing drugs twice.
Yes.
He said the first time it was more of a performance thing, if you will,
Yes.
of a different nature.
Yes.
And then again, pop for steroids when he fought Cormier.
Right.
I know there's been a lot of conversation, and Cormier said, "Hey, I want to do that fight over." To me, Cormier doesn't have any losses. Cormier doesn't have anything to prove because he fought somebody
For sure.
who's taking steroids.
For sure.
In regards to Conor McGregor, I don't want you to think that I don't like your hero or your favorite.
Yes, no.
I think Conor McGregor is absolutely genius from a marketing standpoint. This is a guy who was able to lure Floyd Money Mayweather out of retirement,
Yes, sir.
and for one of the most anticipated boxing fights in an extremely long time. His UFC career, though. So for me, first of all, if you look at his last few, you know, if you look at his resume, Dennis Seaver, who was popped for steroids,
Yes.
Chad Mendez, who was gassed, who took the fight
Also
on
popped
notice,
for steroids.
also popped for steroids.
Right.
He beat Jose Aldo 13 seconds, knocked him into next week, clear. But then he fights Nate Diaz, loses.
Yep.
Fights Nate Diaz again, kind of suspect. It could go either way. He got the win.
Yeah.
He fought Eddie Alvarez in a fight that, with all due respect to Eddie Alvarez, Eddie Alvarez had absolutely no business being in the same octagon as Conor McGregor. It was
Right.
embarrassing. But for me, I don't see how you can call somebody or consider somebody to be one of the greatest champions when they've never defended a title.
Yeah,
Like
no.
both times he's had his title stripped. And when you say the point about Conor will fight anybody, well, he didn't fight Habib. That's okay. I'm thinking to myself, why? Sometimes these things happen. I'm thinking to myself, why in the world if he had all the energy to start hurling things through buses and he could jump on the plane and fly to the venue, why couldn't he get into the octagon?
No, I mean, I think it's a good point. I think that particular incident, I believe he went there, I believe, to make the fight. And I think one thing led to another, and it got out of control. And I don't think anyone in Conor McGregor's camp or anyone was close to him, or his family members, for example, anyone would have advised to do that, and I don't think that was the plan going. The piece that's seldom talked about, obviously, is the reason why he was going there, and there's a lot of talk and reasoning why, obviously, Artem Lobov was surrounded by Khabib in his camp the day before, but there's a whole different backstory that most people haven't been privy to. Luckily, I watched a lot of the MMA media and what they put out, so I was able to look at that story, and there's definitely some, I don't want to get into it on this podcast, but I would tell everyone to go and look at the full story as to why he was there, and it's a lot more serious than I think than it looks on the outside. But regardless, I'll step back. It wasn't a good move, but doing that, I can't take his fights away from him, that he put the time in the octagon. He's one of the hardest trainers. I totally agree. He needs to fight Khabib to prove himself and prove that he's number one, but I believe if he takes a fight in September or October or December of this year and he beats Khabib, I believe this conversation is a lot easier to have. As we know, Khabib is one of the best, and I believe Conor McGregor will find his chin in between two rounds, in between the first and second round, I should say. So I can't take away what he's done inside the ring for what he's done outside, and I think every single one of those fights you mentioned, I think Nate Diaz won, is a good one to bring up, because people, you look at it like, oh, he just took that fight. We have to remember, he took that fight on a week's notice versus a larger fellow who he prepared for, a striker in Jose Aldo. As we all know, Nate Diaz is an absolute beast on the ground and a beast on the feet, and I don't, to me, losing to Diaz doesn't take you out of that conversation, and being able to come right back at it and beat him after, I think, to me, was an amazing thing. It was a great fight. And then if you look at, who he's fought since then,
Eddie Alvarez.
Eddie Alvarez, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
In fighting Eddie Alvarez, if you look at Eddie Alvarez and the tear that he is on lately, I almost frame that fight as even more respectable, even more crazy that he was able to go in there and literally not even take a punch and end it with a 4-punch combo. We saw Justin Gaethje Alvarez, a really engaging fight where they just went at each other, and Alvarez found a way to win. And he was fighting Poirier as well, and he looked like he was finding a way before the illegal shot in that fight too. Yeah. So those guys are all top notch, and framing it in that sense, I believe you look back at Conor and what he's able to do to Eddie, and I think it's even better.
So what I would say to that is that from a marketing standpoint, Conor is the number one draw in the UFC, because people want to show up to hear what he's going to say, see what he's going to do. To your point, there was a time when he was absolutely backing up what he said. If he was calling second round, he was beating him in the second round. So if we were talking about who was the most marketable person, who was the most bankable person in the UFC, hands down it's Conor McGregor. But when I think of people like George St. Pierre and Demetrius Johnson, these are people who have umpteen title defenses in a row.
Yes.
Even John Jones, who again don't have a ton of respect for because he's a cheater, ton of defenses in a row. Anderson Silva, same deal, ton of defenses in a row. Other divisions, we can look at that. Amanda Nunes has defended her title several times in a row, okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Conor McGregor has never defended his title. And even if he was able to go and beat Khabib, I don't think the fight's going to happen, but let's just say, for sake of argument, it does and he wins. Congratulations, you've won that fight.
Right.
But until you actually defend your title to the length of time that a George St. Pierre or a Demetrius Johnson do, I respectfully don't think you can be considered the greatest of all time. But let me ask you this. So we're talking a lot about Conor and George and that. Does Ronda Rousey get into this conversation? Because here's somebody who absolutely pioneered the women's division. I will be honest with you. Don't have a lot of respect for the way that she handled losses. Because one thing I'll give it to your guy on is when Conor loses, we saw it when he lost to Diaz the first time. We saw it when he lost to Floyd Mayweather. Yeah. Gracious in defeat.
For sure.
Ronda Rousey, tail between the legs, and is gone. No press, no nothing, gone.
Yeah, I think it was really tough to watch that for Ronda, for most of us, because I think we all have a baseline respect for Ronda and what she did and how much she elevated the game, right? Like, you see it right now. Without Conor in there and without Ronda, it feels like it's oversaturated and there's too many fights and no one really to sink your teeth into. Whereas Ronda, I watched every one of her fights and was very happy for her. At the end of the day, though, I think it's super nice to see her doing her thing in the WWE.
Sure.
Obviously, I agree that the way that she went out and not kind of just being humble in defeat would have been a better look for her. At the same time, though, I'm not very happy when I lose. And, if I had a camera on me every time I lost, I think I would display some of those same qualities. And I think most people would. It's just you're doing it in front of the world. from an admirer perspective or like a role model perspective, I would have liked to see her stand up and say, you know what, I lost, but I'm going to get back up and I'm doing better. It would have been really nice to see her, especially for young kids who are looking up at that and seeing, okay, I saw her rise to superstardom and then the fall was just so great. So it would have been nice to see that, but at the same time, when you look at her trajectory and how fast she climbed and the way that she did it and the way that she held herself, and she was very vocal to people and very not shaking hands, and their camps are spitting on people, things like that. It was always set up for a huge fall. Did I think it would be so fast and so, oh my goodness, she's gone, she's not going to do an interview about it? No. But like I said, happy to see her in the WWE. I think, I know you're a big fan of that, and people so far, I watched most of her stuff in there, so it's drawn MMA eyes over to that business, so I think that's a good thing. I think it's a shame to end your career like that, but at the same time, I think if she stepped in there again, the same thing would have happened, so in hindsight, it was a good move.
I think similar to Anderson Silva, where Anderson Silva was dominant for so many years, the recipe was written on how to defeat him, and the recipe, I think, was written quite well by Holly Holm in terms of how to defeat Ronda Rousey. So I don't want to dwell, and this is my fault, I don't want to dwell on her defeat as much, but let's bring it back to a more positive light. There was a time in her career where UFC pay-per-views have always been 5 fights. They've always been 5 fights. But when Ronda Rousey was on the pay-per-view, they started putting a 6th and a 7th fight because her fights were literally the time that it took you to heat up a pizza.
Right.
Like 30 seconds a minute, if that, they're done. So she was extremely dominant for a while. I think that in itself, the fact that she pioneered this division, the fact that she was so dominant in this division, definitely puts her in the conversation. I know a lot of times we might kind of it might be easy to overlook because of how her career ended, but I think for a time it was dominant in terms of who's Ronda going to take out next.
Absolutely. And you see that in big stars, I find, give her big respect. If you ever do see Conor, I saw him on TMZ in New York City, and they asked Conor about Ronda, and he said something similar to it's great to see her in the WWE. She was a pioneer. She elevated the game. I don't think guys like Conor McGregor get paid as much if there was no Ronda Rousey, right? So fair. I think looking at that period of time back with a great respect is what everyone should do, and don't dwell on how she went out, but how she held herself when she was in the UFC. I think is the best way to do it.
So question for you. My dream fight. So right now, you touched on the oversaturation. I couldn't agree with you more. I understand that the UFC is a business. They want to make money. I don't need a fight every week. My dream would be, or my kind of utopia for the UFC would be 2 major cards a month. You got the probably a free Fox card, and then 2 weeks later you'd have the pay-per-view, and then go from there. Because if you look at the calendar, there's something every week. It's difficult to get excited for a card right now.
Yeah, and the big news, obviously, last week signing with ESPN, but they announced a 42-fight schedule for next year. So to your point, that's basically a fight a week. So when you're talking about that many fights, I believe folks like us, I never used to miss a fight. It was if there was a fight a month, we would be there. You'd have the friends over, you would all watch, or you'd go out and watch it together, and it was an event, so to speak. And that was the Saturday night we look forward to. Now every Saturday night has a fight, so you kind of have to pick and choose by who's going to be on the card. And I find they haven't been able to put together cards like they used to, where it was a 5-fight solid pay-per-view card. I think the next one like that is UFC Chicago with Alistair Overeem and Stipe and all those guys. I think that card looks really good, but that's the first one of the year where we can really sink our teeth into. Yeah, well, actually, just to correct you, you've got the Chicago card has Romero and Whitaker. Oh, yes, and then the July card has Stipe and Cormier. So we've got 2 back-to-back ones, which will be interesting. But the fight that I want to see, and I'm getting your opinion on this fight, and perhaps the fight you'd like to see. The fight that I would love to see right now would be George St. Pierre and Conor McGregor. I think that would be amazing. Personally, 2 of my favorite fighters in the world, always, obviously being Canadian and watching George St. Pierre and his rise through the ranks and just his whole story, younger, bullied kid, learns karate, learns how to defend himself, champion of the world, and just the way that he carries himself, I'll always look up to him. And the way that he fights, amazing, right? Always going forward, really good mix of takedowns and striking. And I think versus Conor, if you look at Conor's strength, which is obviously striking, and accurate striking, and George's strength being takedowns, I think, looking at that fight, it would be great, but I would definitely give the edge to George right away on size and takedown ability, because Conor would be doing the fight from his back, and we saw how that goes in previous fights. So that would definitely be one I'd want to see. I would kind of watch it it's one of those lose-lose situations.
Yeah.
Looking at something like that for myself personally, but as a fight fan, I think it's a fight to make if they can get close in weight. And then for me, I just really would like to see Conor versus Khabib. There's been so many questions. And then also Tony's in there somewhere too. So once he heals himself, because you don't really want to give up the title via injury like he did.
Yeah.
Don't totally agree with the way that was done either. But I think once we see those kind of fights line up, those are the 4 guys that could probably make it to the top of our list that we talked about earlier via those 4 fights. So very interested to see how that plays out.
So I've kind of touched on this, the Khabib Conor fight. They're looking at doing it later on this year. Are they looking at a Russia location, or are they looking at doing it in Vegas? Do you know?
Originally, they had batted around Russia, but I believe Dana White's last interviews that he's put out there have basically stated that it would be a Vegas fight,
Okay.
Fight capital of the world, and they would want to do it in Vegas. And I tagged you in a few things this week where they're talking September, October. So
Okay.
for me personally, if I had to put my money on it, I would say it will be the December card, the
Okay.
big end of year card, and I'm hoping we can we'll win our bet that we made about the fight this year. Would love to see it sooner, but I really think that's where they'll go. Obviously, it's really going to depend on June, what happens with Conor's court case, which is a whole other kettle of fish. So hopefully that can end nicely, and he can make some retribution for some of the people's nights he ruined that night,
Yeah.
so to speak. Because a lot of the fighters are suing him, Michael Jessa and some other folks. So hopefully we can square all that out and just get it back to the ring.
Question for you. Can we agree on the fact that we're never going to see Floyd Mayweather in an octagon?
Oh,
He
yes.
can take as many pictures on Instagram as he wants, but he knows he's not stepping in there.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. And I think the reality of Floyd is he's a marketing genius. And
Yeah.
he's retired again, and still he's dominating the headlines without even intending to go in. It's tough when you see Tyron Woodley on TMZ saying, oh, Floyd's going to come train with me, but you don't know that that's just clever talk between the two, because Tyron also gets into the top of the headline saying it too, right? So it's good for everyone's brand to kind of tease it. But I think everyone knows MMA skills aren't just ones you can train for 6 months and step in there and beat the best in the world. And, could he fight CM Punk? Sure.
Yeah.
Right? Although the size difference between the two men is too great. But to say he would step in there with, a Conor or an andI Alvarez or someone of that weight that's top class, I don't believe that's possible.
Now you bring up CM Punk, and
Yes.
I had this up earlier. Forgive me. I'm just going to bring it up really
No
quickly.
problem.
We've got a card coming up, like I mentioned, in Chicago, which of course is CM Punk's hometown. And on this card, I want to get your opinion on this. So forgive me. I'm just bringing up the fight card here in Chicago. Of course, we mentioned the main event, Romero Whitaker 2. But listen to all of these fighters that they've got on the prelims. Okay,
Oh,
so
yes.
on the prelims, you've got former light heavyweight champ Rashad Evans. You've got Benavidez. You've got Clay Guida. In the undercard, you've got Alex Overeem. And then on the main card, the first fight of the night, CM has never won a fight Punk.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense whatsoever, other than the fact that CM Punk is probably a big draw in Chicago?
Yeah, honestly, I think that has to be some sort of thing in his contract where he said he's only going to fight pay-per-view, because when you look at the laundry list of people that you mentioned, I mean, even just look at Alistair Overeem. When's the last time he was on an undercard, right? Or does he ever deserve to be on an undercard? I think the easy question to that is no. And the likes of Pettis and Rashad Evans, and Benavidez, who, has fought for the belt before, I think, that's definitely one of those things. If you worked your whole life and you're one of those guys and now you're under CM Punk, can't feel good.
Yeah.
The business aspect of it, I think, you'd be in a better position to answer this. Is Vince McMahon and the WWE stratosphere going to order the pay-per-view in such a detrimental number that it adversely affects that pay-per-view in a positive way?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
One of the things that I think is, I respected CM Punk in the WWE, not just as an entertaining performer, but I've seen him interact with fans. Seems like a genuine nice guy. I've never had the pleasure of really meeting him, but observation. The same way that I can say, respectfully, Conor McGregor seems really good with his fans, okay? So I don't want you to think that I'm completely anti-Conor.
No
That being said, I don't, even if, let's just say, best case scenario for CM Punk, he wins this fight. Mm-hmm. Congratulations. Who's he going to fight next? The person that he's fighting has a similar 0 win, 1 loss record. Eventually, he's going to fight somebody who's been training at this for years, and he's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
I think the best case scenario for CM Punk is for him to lose this fight, and in all honesty, swallow his pride and go back to the WWE. He's still a huge draw. You'll still hear a CM Punk chant in most markets,
Right.
especially Chicago. I think if Vince McMahon has shown he will do business with anybody.
Right.
And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for him to go back to WWE and make a lot of money in a more controlled environment.
Of course.
I know people criticize WWE, people get injured, but not to the extent of taking a knee to the head.
Right.
So
onto the chin.
exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll be very interested to see what happens. I know he's been training since his loss to Mickey Gall. I respectfully, I don't expect the outcome to be much different. I think he's pushing 40 in a sport where you're seeing people who are like mid-20s absolutely dominating. So I think he came into it a little too late. So
yeah, and I think this time he seems like he's set up a little bit better and positioned better to win. Last time it was Mickey Gall was who he fought, and who is a young up and comer who's basically very rounded and good at everything. Mike Jackson is an MMA media member, so it's like Ariel Helwani going to train and then you fight him. So for this one, I think it's a much easier matchup for him. But I agree. I think the path to him is to get back to WWE, get back to his roots, because as I understand it, he was very popular there, made a lot of money. I think him and Vince have a history of butting heads, but like you said, Vince is really good at being able to make dollars and put that kind of beef behind him, right?
His slogan is what's best for business, and I think what's best for business is CM Punk coming back to the WWE. All right, so we touched on a lot of good things here. We're going to get out of here. This room is extremely warm. I want to thank you for always taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you, sir.
We even though we might not agree on a lot of things, I have a ton of respect for you, and I always love chatting UFC with you. So thank you so much.
Right back at you, buddy.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you guys so much for checking this out. As always, feel free to reach out to me on CFL_fan on Twitter. We're going to do more of these. If there's different subjects you'd like for us to talk about, send it in, let us know, and we'll make sure that we cover it. You guys take care. Thanks so much.